Hey, greetings everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thanks for tuning in, for liking, for subscribing. We got another, you guys rock. We got another few subscribers on the rise to greatness. And it's pretty awesome. Couldn't do it without you guys. And I hope we continue to bring some bangers on like we did on the last episode where we really got luck. And sometimes that's how things break for you in World of Warcraft. You have we're playing Classic, and we have a couple episodes back, where we really just fall on our face, and then we get up, and everything just kind of breaks our way. We get a good group, we get good RNG, and that's just some of the highs and lows on the roller coaster that makes this game so exciting. And it was nice to get picked up off of what was otherwise a down day. We've also been reading through the World of Warcraft Official Magazine, and we are finishing up the second issue. This is a rare find. I think we'll finish this one today. Last time we read about some engineering, and we read about how to do Warsong Gulch, and this time we're going to kick it off with an episode about some cool, I can't remember what you call these. I'm drawing a blank, where not laminate, but when you get the higher quality type of kind of game figures for board games or whatever. Resin. All right, so stay a while and listen. All right, and we've done this too, where it's almost like there's sort of ads for things that you could have bought, and you could probably still find some of these things here, but this was definitely peak World of Warcraft. The game's not at its greatness as it was then. The number of millions that are playing is still better than most MMORPGs, but way less than it was at its prime. It says, Epic in the Real World is the name of this article. The people at Fingerprints change your character from data to decor, and it's high time you found out how. Andy Salisbury writes this one. You probably heard of Fingerprints, the service that creates physical manifestations of your World of Warcraft character, but you probably don't know how it's done. We visited the Fingerprints headquarters in Vancouver, British Columbia, and got a tour from facilities manager Terry Willis to find out exactly how these figurines make the jump from Azeroth to your mantelpiece. I mean, they were cool. I would take one if they still made them. Look at this. It's almost like a vintage 3D printer. From flakes to figures. It all begins when you order your fingerprint. Once the job is processed through Fingerprint's system, a 3D artist takes the chosen pose and gear loadout, puts it into rendering software, and makes sure the fingerprint machines are able to print it. After that, up to 6 character models are loaded into a printer, and the printing process begins. The figures are made from layers of a substance similar to plaster powder mixed with a binder, which allows each figure to print in full color, no painting involved. After roughly 8 to 12 hours, the batch of figures is done printing and is taken to a depowdering room. It's here that a powerful airbrush is used to free the green state figures from a dusty prison, and then they're taken to the artist. At this point, the figures are still extremely fragile, as Terry demonstrates for us by applying a minute amount of pressure to a spare figure, breaking a large chunk into dust. The next step is taken care of by steady-handed artists, who first clean off any excess powder and then make sure all parts such as eyebrows and fingers are accounted for. After a figure is given the all-clear by an artist, it is then moved to a process called infiltration, which makes the frail figures sturdier by dipping them into a special solution. So this is like protein 3D printing. Once the infiltration process is complete, the artists take one more look at the figures. This time they're looking to finish off the process by removing any remaining powder and ensuring that the figure has a clean finish and is free of flaws and defects. It's here that many of the artists' love for World of Warcraft comes in handy. If they notice that a weapon model or pose is off in any way, they discard it and start the printing process all over again to provide the highest quality possible. Finally, the modeling artists send the end product over to the finishers, who are responsible for fixing them to proper bases, placing a glass dome over the model, and applying the tamper-proof band. Oh man, so you gotta have a dome on top because they're that fragile. And it shows here that the type of printers that your characters are created in are also commonly used in other industries, but don't expect a medical model or an auto part here. This is the top of a block with 6 different characters as it goes through the printing process. The shapes of the figures beginning to emerge from the plaster. Kind of interesting. It's like as it's going line by line. They keep showing us this Palandrazer, this probably a Blood Elf Paladin. The figures are made from layers and printed in full color with no painting involved. They kind of show it. Despite all the care put into the manufacturing and quality control processes, there's still another hurdle to clear: shipping. Boxes get shipped around the world and pass through numerous hands, so sometimes bad things happen. If a dome should shatter or a character gets a part broken in transit, Fingerprints will replace it free of charge, getting another copy of the character into the printer and on its way out the door quickly. Countless hours are put into the making sure that each and every print is as accurate a recreation of its in-game counterpart as possible. The staff at Fingerprints firmly understands that these avatars have had time and emotion invested in them, and they do everything they can to respect that and quickly address any issues that crop up. Customer satisfaction is key, Terry affirms. Artists, complete with a degree in fine arts, are in charge of cleaning up the figures and putting on the finishing touches before they're shipped to customers. The company can make busts in all shapes, sizes, classes, and races. However, this gnome hunter figure isn't likely ever to leave the testing room. How is that a gnome hunter? He's got like big ears, or I guess that's maybe some kind of helmet. Interesting. Figurines or bust. The folks at Fingerprints will soon be adding one more way for you to immortalize your character: a bust. That's kind of, I think, what we're looking at. Busts, a sculpture of a character's head, chest, and shoulders, will be offered, allowing you to put your favorite in-game avatar front and center, exactly as it deserves to be. Spending those 60 emblems of frost for new shoulders was a smart move after all. You can get more information at fingerprints.com. And that's sort of what we have here. These are all, they seem more like busts than anything else. Fingerprints busts will print in the same high quality that you've come to know and love, no matter how many pointed bits or dreadlocks you happen to have. Here's another one. I would really like to see the actual figures. It seems like they're all the busts. The print stats. What type of characters are players immortalizing? Here's a percentage breakdown by race and gender. The most common is a human male with about 12%. Night elf female, not surprising, and night elf male each make up about 9%. Tauren males are 8%, and as are human females. Then blood elf females make 7%, undead males 6%, blood elf males 6%, male orcs and dwarfs make up 5%, and so do Draenei females. Gnomish males make up 4%. Draenei males, undead females, troll males, and gnomish females all make up around 3% each, with female trolls and female taurens making up about 2%. And, sorry, uggos, the female orcs and female dwarfs make up less than 1% each. Interview with the Fingerprints CEO, Ed Fries. Well, it could be Fries, but I think it's Fries. One of my bosses has the last name Fries, spelled like that. Whatever people think looks cool, we will print. I also went to high school with a dude with that last name, spelled that way, pronounced Fries. How'd the idea for Fingerprints come about? Ed Fries. Friends working on Spore sent me a 3D color print of a Spore character in 2006. I hadn't seen one before, and I thought it was amazing. I set it on my desk next to my computer where I was playing World of Warcraft. After about a month of staring at it and playing the game, I finally put 2 and 2 together and thought, what if I do this with that? After that, it took almost a year to put all the technology together to be able to launch the business in December of 2007. What led to the decision to make busts the next physical manifestation of World of Warcraft characters in the real world? The idea for Fingerprints busts came out of a brainstorming session with our creative partners at Blizzard. I like the idea for a couple of reasons. One is that it gives us something more affordable than a full Fingerprint statue, but it's still your character wearing your gear. Another is that because we only have to do the head and shoulders, we can actually make the scale bigger than on our normal statues, so you can really see the detail in the face. What was the first bust made? The first computer model of a bust we made was a Tauren, and that was back in September. The first we actually printed were in December, and were an undead and a gnome. What level of detail will the busts have? For example, will blood elf earrings and troll face paint be included? The level of detail is the same as our full-size Fingerprint statues, in that we include everything you see in the game on both. The difference is the facial features are larger and easier to see on the bust, especially for smaller characters like blood elf females and gnomes. What was the initial reaction from the World of Warcraft community to Fingerprints? The response has been overwhelming. For the entire first year, we had to hold a lottery each month just to control how many were ordered. We've just completed our second year, and demand continues to be very strong. We've sold more than 20,000 statues in the last 2 years. What are some of the most common outfits players have their characters printed in? Is it usually high-end raid gear or holiday outfits? About half our orders are in cutting-edge raid gear, and the other half could be just about anything from green quest gear to Brewfest garb. Whatever people think looks cool, we will print. We get about one request a week to do a pair of characters as wedding cake toppers. Often they're wearing the tuxedo and wedding dress, but not always. Yeah, my wife plays, but she doesn't play so much that she would ever want to do something like that. All right, modern raiding. So now we're going to have an article on UI mods. We had one like this in the first issue. When it comes to raiding, unit frame mods can help enormously. They do. Who creates these add-ons, and what made them decide they needed a mod? Meet the people behind the code. This is an article by Carrie Allen. So I think we're first going to interview someone named Cameron Knight. His character's name is Valko. He's a Draenei Paladin on the, I think the United States Nessingwary server, and he's made Fubar, Cartographer, and Chinchilla. Pitbull is a raiding unit frame mod that offers extra functionality and customization. Everything is fully customizable, including bar textures and fonts. It provides extra information such as heal statuses, party target display, and 3D portraits. You can also place an experience bar on your character or pet. Track reputation, keep an eye on aggro. There are plenty of options, says Knight. For the best incarnation, Pitbull 4, Knight and his modding colleagues focused on making the add-on more efficient and accessible. That's why I like LVUI, because it does a lot of these things that used to be tons of different mods, and now they are all put into one. If you've ever been kicked out of an Onyxia group for not having deadly boss mods or Omen, you're aware that high-level raiding can involve access to more layers of information than the standard interface often offers. Raid-focused unit frame add-ons, those that help healers keep an eye on health and debuffs, or aid tanks trying to keep track of aggro across multiple mobs, are a godsend, allowing the experience to focus on fun tactics. It's true, especially for tanking and healing. Mods are a huge help. World of Warcraft, I don't use the mod, but I was just tanking a dungeon last night with my wife, and I'm not typically a tank. I was using my arms warrior, but there's multiple times I'm just like, geez, I wish I had an aggro add-on, but since I don't typically tank, I didn't have one. World of Warcraft has grown over the years, says Ian Day, the man behind X-Pearl Unit Frames, a popular add-on that replaces some of the default interface elements. Initially, the unit frames were perfectly adequate, but as Blizzard added more features, there was a need for certain things to be represented. Raid icons, heal monitors, etc. Modders often begin as players who fiddled with an interface element to make it meet their own needs, and later continue modifying it to suit other players as well. This was how Jacob Hare began, by creating a simple add-on that allowed his rogue to apply poisons to his weapons easily. Although that particular mod didn't work out too well, he tried again when a friend interrupted him from his fishing daily in Terracar, asking him to create something to help with the Malagos fight. That's bod. Malagos Flamer, a mod to track player debuffs on the boss. Next came Profession Bars. I remember the exact moment I had the idea. I was on my Death Knight in the Netherwing camp in Shadowmoon. I went to prospect a bunch of ore in my bag and was annoyed by the process of clicking the prospect button in my spellbook, so I wrote a note about creating profession bars. He said it was hard, my first time using invisible frames instead of feeding data to the chat system, so I had to learn about specialist templates. Hare began to focus on raiding add-ons by playing around with the existing S-Raid Frames mod, contacting author Nev Cariel, and getting permission to merge his features into it. Through Nev Cariel, Hare learned the ins and outs of Lua, the scripting language used to create World of Warcraft interface add-ons. He's now created a plugin for the mod and new supporting features. With S-Raid Frames, my first project was adding custom statuses, allowing users to change the appearance of the frames in response to any buff or debuff they wish. It was something I needed myself. I was running 10-player Trial of the Crusader back then and had to keep track of Anubrop's penetrating cold debuff somehow, he explains. After that, I allowed the users to change the raid frames any way they want to allow for custom statuses. All right, so then now we also have, that was Jacob Hare. He plays Treason, a Tauren Druid on the Twilight Tamer European server. He has made S-Raid Frames Advanced, He also did Malagos Flamer, Profession Bars, and S-Raid Frames. S-Raid Frames Advanced. Originally designed to replace the raid frames provided by CT Raid Assist, the authors of this mod aim to present all the raid frame information a player needs without too much distraction. Starts with the frames and nothing else, giving each player the option to configure the setup in whichever way they need. For example, you can set it to focus on incoming heals on targets, debuff filtering, or dispellable targets. What's a unit frame? A unit frame is a box that holds information about you, your target, your party, or other such units. For healers and tanks, raid unit frames allow you to keep detailed progress of aggro and health situations in your party. Add-ons allow players to customize their unit frames to offer more detailed or different information. This is one thing that was kind of unique to World of Warcraft at the time, is just how they fully embraced the modding community. It's a smart move. So Cameron Knight now is our next one. I made Pitbull customizable because I know a lot of people out there want to do crazy complicated things with their unit frames, and I wanted to help with that. So I started playing World of Warcraft and soon after became interested in add-ons, says Cameron Knight, the guy behind the Pitbull rating mod. I became obsessive about making my user interface, UI, the best, the leanest possible. The problem was that my computer at the time had a mere 512 megabytes of RAM, and all those heavy add-ons were slowing things down immensely. So I decided to create a lighter replacement for Titan Panel, which became Foobar. Since then, I made many more, including Cartographer, Pitbull, Parrot, and Cowtip. Almost all of these are defunct, like people don't use them anymore. They've been superseded by, upgraded ones. For these players, modding is a hobby, a true part of the World of Warcraft experience. Many start young, and it simply becomes an aspect of how they game. And any little kid now that has their own Minecraft server, like my son, he's essentially I learned my own. If you're going to be a serious PC gamer, you got to have some familiarity with coding. And mine came from back in the day when you wanted to play Diablo 1 and you wanted to essentially mod that game, and you had to look up other mods in the community. You had to use the archaic internet and stuff like that. And then you had to essentially go into the code and mod it yourself, or, put some merge files and stuff like that. And you're just following instructions, but it is teaching you kind of a basic thing. And now it's just in the world of macros and a lot more friendly abilities to play games, but still even emulating stuff like that, you can get some familiarity. But now the younger generation, they're using what's that coding app that tons of little kids use? Not Switch, that's Scratch. They learn it with Scratch. They learn it through Minecraft, so it's cool. They'll get there. I began when I was 10, says Knight. My 19-year-old brother was a computer science major and brought home a book on programming. By the end of that summer, I was able to complete most of the problems before he was able to. 12 years later, I know roughly 20 programming languages, and my brother's no longer in that line of work. He became a lawyer instead. I've been programming since I was 16, and when I started playing World of Warcraft, modding the UI was the natural thing for me to do, says Day. Xperl became my learning platform. I learned Lua as I went. Over time, I became more ambitious with my programs. For these mod makers, the focus is very much on the community rather than themselves. They're keen to applaud their colleagues and believe that a player's choice of rating mod should come down to personal preference. No one runs around shouting mine's best. As an author, of course, I use S-Raid frames, but others are happy with Grid or Healbot, says Hare. Everyone should use whatever raid frame suits them, as long as it doesn't impact their ability to contribute to the raid. Carrieline is also a Copper Girl, a Fury Warrior braving the Sub-Zero Chill of Ice Crown Citadel when not running an instance for Emblems of Frost or Triumph. Mods, especially UI mods, they're also one of those things that are kind of divisive. Casual raiders don't, and not raiders, just casual players, they don't want all this information. Like when my wife and my son play, they hate using my computer because of ElvUI and the other mods that I use on retail. Just it's too much clutter for them. They prefer just a simple, classic. And I have a couple mods on there for them, like Questy. They do appreciate that. Deadly boss mobs, details. My son does like details. And I have Rare Finder and stuff like that they can turn on and off. Okay, Ian Day was Zack on Undeg Road on the European server Bloodhoof. He made the mods Grim Reaper and Malagos Helper X-Pearl unit frames. Ian Day created X-Pearl unit frames off the back of Nimbia's Pearl unit frames, using it as a tool to learn the Lua scripting language. Starting with a few simple tweaks, X-Pearl evolved into an established mod in its own right. It offers additional features to the standard unit frames, including raid icons, health and aggro monitoring, and the ability to see incoming heals. All right, now we have a community artist spotlight. That's actually cool. A gnome fishing, and we've got this, what do you call those things? Those like plant abominations. Visions of Azeroth from the players who live there. That's a really cool picture. Your turn if you want to send them their art. This is from Monica Legolas. Shibuki, go fish. I really like that picture. I think it's pretty cool. Here you have from Paul Kwan, who plays Shiramoon, a Blood Elf Warlock. Pretty good. Van Kostik Chevsey, the King of Frozen Throne. Nice. Mary Cannabis. Your last name's Cannabis? Marie Cannabis? Aggro Control. That's a kind of a psychedelic-y picture. It's neat, though. I like it. Bin Delaney. That is a good... I like that. That's a good drawing or painting. All right. Conscientiously objecting to 80, the pacifist. Is there a place in Azeroth for a player who's a lover, not a fighter? I talked about this when we looked at the table of contents. I did this one time. If you didn't catch that episode, I have a disciplined priest who's, I think they're level 70, but I took them from 0 to 60, not all the way to 80, because I wanted to play with them at some point, but I took from 0 to 60, doing nothing except herbalism. Place be the journey. The pacifist in question, Nor, an 80 gnome rogue, Rhinish, an 80 undead priest, Mainchen, a 61 night elf druid. Now, how did I get there? Well, also you get XP from experimenting. Exploring. You could also get it from non-combat quests. In a world filled with war, one man dares to craft his own way to max level without a single act of violence. Being a trailblazer has never been easy, and Brian Wesley has had to overcome some major hurdles in his quest for peace and epic loot. But by choosing to play on his own terms, he's pushed the boundaries of the game and made his own unique World of Warcraft experience. In a game that has war in the title, you decided that you wanted something entirely different and forged your own path. Leveling up through quest and exploration experience rewards rather than killing. The first question's pretty simple. Why? After reading about a troll warrior who only fought bare-handed and naked, and a dwarf hunter who meleeed, I decided to see how far I could get in the game without killing anything. A different type of self-imposed limitation. I wanted to see if it was even possible. How did your first attempts at pacifism in Azeroth go? My first pacifist was Rhinish. Oh, so he has 3. An undead priest that I made in mid-2007. I decided on that race and class for role-playing reasons, but soon ran out of quests and stalled at level 14. So I tried an alliance character, a gnome rogue, who could also solo some dungeon quests using stealth, but also hit a limit around level 23. A lot of changes have been made to the game since then. Has it gotten easier for you to advance without killing? Patches 2.3, The Gods of Zilliman, and 3.2, Call of the Crusade, helped a lot by making it possible to level through battlegrounds. Both characters skilled up engineering to help their teams win without killing anyone, of course. Nor used bombs to stun players and stop flag capping, while Rhinish mostly healed, occasionally whacking people capping flags with his fishing rod. After getting both characters to 80, I decided to try it one more time, this time avoiding battlegrounds entirely. What's an average day look like in the life of a pacifist in World of Warcraft? I mean, it wouldn't be that fun endgame to do it. Like, what are you going to do? No pain, lots of gain. The pacifist tips for those tired of fighting. Healing and fishing don't count. The pacifist faces his critics. 1. The Alliance has significantly more non-violent delivery, running, and gathering quests. Herbalism and Inscription are peace-friendly, allowing you to create dozens of Dark Moon decks for experience, up to level 55. Oh, I didn't know that. The stealth and healing capabilities of a druid are very useful for escort and solo dungeon quests. You don't have a problem with healing other characters in Battlegrounds indirectly contributing to the death of characters in the opposing faction. No, real-life pacifists like Desmond Dross were medics during wars. I noticed you have a lot of fishing achievement. Doesn't fishing count as killing? No. There are times I just hang around a zone hoping someone kills the mobs I need. There are a few different modes depending on the situation. One thing all three of my characters have done is level up various professions for the profession-specific quest chains, nor changed professions 13 times. Sometimes I'm doing lots of gathering, which also helps pay the bills. At lower levels, I travel to optimize my exploration XP. Exploring areas too late or too early means missing out on the optimal amount of XP. There are a few quests that can be done by using found corpses like Screecher Spirits and Feralus. So there are times I just hang around a zone hoping someone kills the mobs I need for these quests. The amount of quests I can always fish in Zangarmarsh, hoping to catch a strange engine part. Nor eventually caught 103. How many times have you completed the Darkmoon Fair deck quest? 29 rogue decks, 140 swords decks, 34 mages decks, and 45 demons decks. Do you ever try to convince other players in game to give up violence as well? I occasionally roleplay as a pacifist, but I don't expect other players to listen, and I hardly ever group. I've run into a few players that try to level as pacifists and will occasionally join forces to complete dungeon quests. A Blood Elf Paladin of all things has been the most consistent. What's next? I can't wait to see what Cataclysm offers. Hopefully it adds low-level daily quests. Of course, I would love to see pacifist NPCs who give quests that players have to complete without killing anything. More short-term, I plan on having a beach party in Dark Shores, a sort of going-away party for Aberdeen when Cataclysm comes, assuming I hit 80 before then. And now, this is extremely easy, because like I said, you can just either mine or do herbalism, along with other, the same things he's talking about, to easily level up. Just fly around the world, level your profession through collection. All right, so now they're writing a column here on, this is what they did to finish off the last one. So we're going to kind of do like a little mini article on the three types. So beginning with Alan Dexter's Attention Seeker Tanking. You're always in demand and in the spotlight, but it's all too easy to slip and lose sight of your priorities. A little awareness goes a long way in a dungeon. Be polite, compliment them on their damage output, and then ask them to hold off a little at the start. So we did Black Fathom Deeps last night, like I said. Took a while. It probably took an hour and a half. My wife was healing, and she did fine. Nothing was her fault. I was tanking, but like I said, I'm not a tank spec, so it does. I do have a shield and all the regular talents learned, so I was able to at least kind of hang. Although it did take me a little bit to get my one-hander sword skill up because I was at level 1 with that. But the DPS that we brought, they just weren't bringing it. Honestly, my wife now, while she'll heal, she does not contribute to DPS. She's not good at multitasking. So if you tell her, hey, just heal, she's good. She'll keep it alive. She won't burn her mana, but she's not the best about knowing all of her totems and stuff like that. It really takes, while I'm tanking, I'm kind of verbally calling out for her and making sure she has her hotbar set up and everything, her abilities, so that she can heal. And she did a fine job, but there's always a spot in the middle of Black Fathom Deeps where the Twilight Reavers and stuff by the Baron Aquinas kind of area on top, they can chain pull. I've wiped in that exact spot before, so we had a wipe there, and it was just a bad situation with the chain pull. And then I screwed up and caused the second wipe because after you kill the Warlock guy, Zerod or whatever his name is, you're supposed to light these beakers one at a time, and each one brings a wave. Well, it's the first time in a while that I've led that, and I forgot, and I lit all 4 at once, so we got zerged. But luckily, the group stayed together when we completed the dungeon. As a tank, the new Dungeon Finder is a simply fantastic experience. Join, and you're guaranteed a slice of hot dungeon action within seconds of clicking the Find Group button. Everyone, it seems, needs a tank, which is only to be expected. We rock. However, that kind of celebrity comes at a price. As a tank, all eyes are on you. Make one wrong step and you can quickly go from hero to zero. It's true. It's, I would say it can be the hardest thing to do. And you have to know, you have to be better than everybody else. It's definitely it's the most stressful for sure. Sometimes, depending on the situation, healing can be harder. So how do you ensure you stay the hero? For the most part, your damage-dealing teammates will love you to bits as long as you're the magnificent monster magnet that never lets go. ever. Sure, the group's healer may have some worries about your ability to mitigate damage, but ultimately, as long as all the enemy damage is on you and your group's damage is all on the enemy, happy times should ensue. However, if you find yourself in a group with one or more well-geared and skilled damage dealers, your job gets harder and easier in turns. On the plus side, the nasties will drop more quickly. On the downside, there's a far greater risk that you'll suddenly find yourself standing alone as the monsters you're supposed to be occupying wander off and start nom-nom-nomming on your fragile damage-dealing chums. If this does happen before you reach for the panic button or start questioning everyone's ability to play, take a deep breath and head towards the next mindless hordes to try to work out who has threat and why. Wait until the fight's over to whisper a few carefully worded questions to find out what's going on. Perhaps one of your damage dealers let rip a little too early. Maybe they set to work on a monster that wasn't your primary target, or might have been outside of your initial grab zone, or their pet has its auto taunt still on. Sometimes things like this can happen. Be polite, compliment them on their damage output, and then ask them to hold off a little at the start of the fight to ensure you have the monster's attention before they let fly. One option to make the fight go a bit more smoothly is to set up keyboard shortcuts for labeling your target with the skull, cross, and other markers. In general, most damage dealers will know that you mean kill this first when you flag them up with a skull. They'll at least try to drop their area of effect spells on that target, if nothing else. It's worth laying down a few ground rules at the start of the run, too. Keep it simple and punchy, such as single target the skull, please, otherwise go nuts. If you're about to begin a tricky fight, a quick heads up is all that's needed. Stay outside the fire, stop DPS on mirror, and bunch on me in phase 3 are quick to type and easy to understand. There's no need to write an essay. Holding the attention of your foes is key. Build threat on your main target, but sneak in damage to the others as well so that you got plenty of threat on them when the damage dealers get your first target down. If you're looking to do a lot of random groups, then there are glyphs and talent builds that work particularly well for tanking multiple targets at the same time. Glyph of Maul for druids makes them all attack hit an additional target. Glyph of Cleaving does the same for the warrior's cleave ability. Glyph of Hammer of the Righteous makes the paladin's ability strike an extra foe as well, helping to ensure another ad stays within that lovely consecration area. Most of all, have fun. Tanking can be hard at times, but the new Dungeon Finder is all about bringing fun back to the pug. I, for one, simply can't get enough. And this guy, Alan Dexter, loves to tank. He also has an endgame mage, but finds that cloth yields a little too quickly for tanking purposes. Doesn't stop him from trying, though. Alright, so this is... I can't tell what this one's going to be. A DPS? Yeah. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. In random dungeons, the value of DPS is usually weighted in damage done. But how do you avoid becoming dead weight? By Natarama. Before you go dump aggro, ponder whether you should just stand fast and take the damage. For the most part, playing a DPS character while using the Dungeon Finder results in good times. Queue up, wait a while, longer than a tank or healer, it must be said, but that's understandable, considering the majority of players opt for the allegedly less responsible role of damage dealing, and then go hurtling into whatever instance the great god of the random dungeon dice roll happens to throw at you. A quick flex of my button-mashing fingers to get them warmed up, and I'm hot to trot, ready to deal out a rain of vengeance and furious anger to those who would attempt to poison and destroy my pug brothers. Let the good times roll. Heaven and hell. As the loading screen passes, I find myself in a group with unfamiliar people. As I begin to putting up my priest buffs, a little angel and a little devil appear on either side of my head in a puff of smoke. Careful, Nataruma, the little Draenei angel says, shining the halo hovering over its well-polished horns. This tank is freshly geared by the looks of it. You better keep your aggro under control. The little devil on the other side, looking considerably more Eridar in its crimson splendor, scoffs. Nah, he'll be fine. It already takes a few seconds for your dots to tick. So you're not opening up straight away, right? Besides, looks like we can use the DPS. What options do I have? I know that I might give the tank a hard time if I do go full out, but if I don't, I would have the feeling I'm not playing to the best of my ability. Before Wrath of the Lich King, threat used to be a much bigger problem for most damage-dealing classes. These days, things are comparatively easier to manage, but even so, caution should always be the order of the day when starting a dungeon with any group. They've definitely dumbed down tanking, like tanks holding aggro is pretty much automatic now. During the first pull, I always keep a sharp eye on my Omen add-on, which I find to be the best way to learn how well a tank manages aggro, while holding back on the throttle just a little bit if the tank does fine. I will step up on the gas a little more with each successive pull until I'm up to full speed. We both get what we want, enough DPS to clear the dungeon, little enough threat to keep things under control. When bad things happen, despite any damage dealer's best efforts, there will always be occasions when the worst happens and you accidentally pull aggro. What do? Well, dumping aggro is the most obvious choice. Hunters can feign death, mages can ice block, priests can fade, rogues can vanish. There's also minor ones like feint. Or there's one that warriors have too. One thing you really need to consider is that, or even better for a rogue or for a hunter, you can have the trick shot or the tricks of the trade, is that sometimes when you dump aggro the tank at that particular moment, it might not be the highest character on the aggro table. Sometimes it might be one of your DPS friends, or worse, the poor old healer, and that is definitely a bad thing. So before you go dumping your aggro, ponder whether or not you should just stand fast and take the damage. Perhaps the healer will be able to keep you alive long enough for the tank to grab aggro, or maybe you should kite the thing around. It's surprising how static some players are, and how many people forget that the simplest things like running towards the tank so he or she can quickly grab aggro can help save the day. Better yet, that's true. That's a good point, and I should be better about that. Try a crowd control spell. Back in the day, crowd control spells were often a vital part of successful dungeon crawling, helping keep a monster completely out of the fight while your party dealt with the foe's friends first. These days, almost every group has enough firepower to successfully rain down AoE death and destruction on any group of monsters without having to divide and conquer, so the fine art of crowd control has been somewhat lost. But those spells are still in your spellbook, and they can really save the day when used correctly. It's actually pretty cool to be able to control the monster that's coming at you, staying on top of the situation, giving the tank time to regain aggro. Expanding horizons. Ultimately, any good damage dealer should always have a set of contingency plans up his or her sleeve, ready to pull out should things go wrong. The reality is that most dungeon wipes happen because players don't know how to deal with a bad situation once it occurs, not because of the mistake itself. People panic, people die. If you're thinking ahead and know what to do when bad things happen, you've got a fighting chance and can help save the day. So have a look at your spellbook. Think about what you have in your repertoire that might be able to put right or wrong, and get creative. You never know when something like a sheep, ice trap, hammer adjust, or even a cyclone might save the day. Nadarama's true identity is as great a mystery as how shadow priests can run around all shadowy while in bright sunlight. Twisted Faith is the blog that this life-stealing DPS mongering shade calls home. And we'll finish off with a column on healing called Kill and Cure by Luis Villazon. Finish off these little mini articles, which we're getting close to the end. The best defense is a good offense. Put that spare mana to use with some part-time DPS. By killing the mob more quickly, you're mitigating its damage potential. Like the best defense is a good offense. Healing is fundamentally different from the other roles in World of Warcraft. For the tank and DPS classes, more threat or damage is always better. Killing things quickly is fun, and the faster you kill one mob, the sooner you can start killing the next. Healing isn't like that. You can only heal the damage as fast as it comes in. As you gear up, your heals become quicker and stronger, but the mobs continue to supply you with the damage at the same rate. And as the DPS members in your party get better, they kill the mobs more quickly, so the total amount of damage available for you to heal each fight actually drops. So there you are in your magnificent tier 10 outfit, casting a heal over time every few seconds and not very much else, which on the one hand is a lot less stressful for you, but on the other hand is a lot less exciting. So get proactive. One solution is for the tank to simply pull larger and larger groups, so this relies on a highly skilled tank, and it's much easier for things to go wrong. The approach that I favor is for healers to start doing some DPS. For those without a damage-dealing ult or secondary spec, at first it can feel like an alien concept. Long-time healers often end up with a pacifist attitude, and many of you probably don't even have your damage spells on your action bars, much less hotkeyed. But think of it this way. By killing the mob more quickly, you're mitigating its damage potential, so you can look at Smite or Lightning Bolt as proactive heals, sort of like Power Word Shield. It's important not to get too distracted. Nobody's health should be dropping below 50% just because you decided to start competing with the mage standing next to you. This is just about filling in those gaps when you have plenty of mana and no one needs immediate healing. When I use the Dungeon Finder on my Druid, I normally heal the first fight or two without using Tree of Life form. This lets me gauge the strength of the group. Then if things are going well, I'll open up the next fight by placing heals over time on the tank and then casting Hurricane. On boss fights, I will usually start in Tree of Life form, but once everything's under control, I might drop back into caster form to do a little DPS with Wrath, Moonfire, and Starfire. When I'm playing my Priest, I'll normally try to play Shadow Word Pain on everything and then holding over for damage and healing as circumstances permit. Paladins are a little light on long-range abilities, but they still have Exorcism, Holy Wrath, and Holy Shock, and now the way it works with expertise, you need to be in melee to be a Paladin, a healer. While Shamans have a variety of spells at their disposal, ultimately the message here is to experiment. Definitely don't go all out and take risks that might result in a wipe. Ease yourself in gently and keep an eye on which spells are easy to sneak into your healing rotation and get comfortable with what you're doing. If you have dual specs, you might feel tempted to use your DPS spec for the easy fights, but I'd caution against that. Once you start losing entire abilities and changing the layout of your action bars, you fundamentally compromise your principal role as healer. Similarly, think carefully before you switch gear from your healing to your DPS set. If the hunter's pet accidentally picks up an extra group mid-fight and you're stuck in your hit gear, you might not be able to salvage the situation quickly enough, and a fast group in an easy dungeon is not going to want to wait while you drink back up to full mana after switching specs for the boss. In the end, you probably won't add very much compared to the dedicated damage dealers in your party. If you achieve 5% of total damage done, you're doing well. But you're the healer, so any damage you do is pure gravy. Tanks will love you for it, and DPS won't feel threatened. Best of all, you continue to reap the benefit of your awesome gear, even in easy encounters. And Luis Villazón has been dealing out the healing in World of Warcraft for over 5 years. He's the owner of not one, but 2 raiding priests, and can also occasionally be seen rustling around Azeroth as a tree-shaped druid. The Guildmaster. So here's a Guildhall article. Avoiding drama when distributing shiny new toys. We're close to finishing this issue, so I just want to try to bust it out. Rolls on the cloth, spell power, bracers, please. 6 rolls. Who's won something already? Now we're down to 5 rolls. Main spec or off spec? 4 rolls. Oh no. I didn't know you could go purple with Envy. Just over a year ago, my magazine, PC Gamer, decided to create a World of Warcraft guild. I wonder if this is the same guy that talked about the events thing last issue. We asked our readers to join us in-game to raid the hardest dungeons and to fight competitively in arenas and battlegrounds. It worked. We now have about 700 players and a lot of fun. But we were naive. Naive, stupid, and unprepared for the drama, debate, and work we need to put into a guild. The biggest drama? Loot. As our characters began to come within touching distance of level 80 next, Rammus and the Obsidian Sanctum raid dungeons beckoned, and it became clear that we'd be able to conquer them. Raid experienced players from across the UK had flocked to our guild. Players who had defeated Sunwell, Molten Core, even, deep breath, the original incarnation of Onyxia. But we didn't think about loot. At all. We assumed that loot drops would be a nice reward for attending, but that it was the experience of raiding and enjoying the world that would motivate players. Loot was a consequence of raiding, not a reason to raid. Complicated systems like DKP or Suicide Kings were for the hardcore raiders, not for our semi-casual friends of a magazine. A few months later, and we had our raid team. We launched into Naxxramas. We marveled at the spiders, the health pools of the bosses, and the shiny purples that dropped from their corpses. It was a disaster. I'm grateful that our guild put up with our ineptitude. We'd entirely forgotten to put any thought into how to get our loot to the players who needed and deserved it most. Our first formal loot system was via a loot council because we thought that that distribution was best decided by the officers who had raided extensively. Officers in the raid would consider how many times players had raided with us, how many items players had already looted, and how much of an upgrade a particular item was for each player. All these conversations took place in private. For the first few weeks, our raiders seemed happy, but as our guild continued to recruit, we would prioritize new level 80s over older 80s, believing that it was better for the guild to gear up all players as quickly as possible. Looking back, I can't quite believe we didn't realize that the more experienced players would begin to feel shortchanged. Doikey. And they did. Our raid started to become more and more ill-tempered. Loot was becoming a problem. It wasn't just about giving new players more. Our public loot spreadsheet was so big as to be unusable. Distributing loot was taking 10 minutes per boss. The discussions afterward were becoming disastrous. Players given an epic were met with silence rather than the usual grats or well done. We had to fix it. I don't want to talk about the loot system we eventually decided upon, nor do I want to recommend a loot system to you. Speaking to other guild leaders, it's clear that no loot system is perfect. Top-tier loot is a limited and in-demand resource. How you determine where it goes is entirely up to you. But I do think that if you're starting a raiding guild, you should think about your loot distribution well before your first raid. Think about who you want to prioritize, new raiders or old hands. Think about whether you want to reward players for attendance or discipline them for missing out. Think about whether you want to separate loot distribution from your officers and whether you want a transparent system. Think about how you'll deal with major content updates. And most of all, think about how you will deal with the inevitable problems. Get it right, and raiding will be about the experience, not the loot. It will be more fun for everyone. And a community quarter here as we get to the end of this magazine. No right way to play. The truth is that World of Warcraft has something to offer players of all different types. You've heard epic accounts of great evils vanquished by a tight-knit band of Azeroth's mightiest champions. Those who live to tell the tale say, you're missing out if you're not in a hardcore raiding guild. You've heard soldiers of the Alliance and Horde speak of mighty war machines and heroic last stands on blood-stained fields. They say battlegrounds are the only path to glory. You've also heard some citizens of Azeroth say they simply want to explore everything the world has to offer, and that true happiness lies in leveling alts. It seems that every World of Warcraft player has something different to say about how to get the most out of the game, and it's easy to feel like you might be missing out or screwing up if you don't follow suit. Yeah, and I do agree with that sentiment, but I've also never felt like slavishly beholden to it. I understand it's enough for everyone, and all you have to do, that's one of the reasons why I love the achievement system. Because all you have to do is look at the achieves and realize, like, I might not be getting the PvP achievements, but no one's out there getting all the rando ones that I get. Well, not no one, but you know, you get the point. I have a different way. I have different ways to feel validated, I guess. The truth is that World of Warcraft has something to offer players of all different types, and Azeroth is only as fun as you make it. If you find yourself wandering aimlessly around the streets of Stormwind because your usual questing partner isn't around, maybe it's time to try your hand at something you haven't attempted before. Who knows, you may march onto a battleground or bravely venture into a dangerous dungeon and discover an entirely new aspect of the game to enjoy. Even if you've had a go at one aspect of the game or another and found it not to your liking, you never know when a different group of players, a new class or spec, or a different strategy might change your tune. After you find the gameplay you like, it's important to find your own style. You can seek out a guild for some dungeon running or PvP, or you can focus on completing quests in as many zones as possible to explore the many stories of Azeroth. You may even want to create a character of another race or another faction to experience the world and the lore from an entirely different perspective. If you need to satisfy the urge for tackling the greatest challenges, there are raiding guilds suited to every playstyle. Or you can find some like-minded folks to form an arena team to compete in savage PvP combat. Azeroth is a big place with a wide array of choices to make, and a key factor to enjoying your play is not to get overwhelmed, and that's not always an easy task. Other players are often quick to share their opinions, so remember that just because one person says that a certain style, talent, spec, class, or even trinket's the best in the game, that doesn't mean it'll be the most fun for you. That's why I don't like meta the engineer with most of my characters. So take the game one step at a time. Try new things and do your best not to let what's fun for other folks keep you from discovering what's fun for you. You'll never have a better time than when you're playing the game the way you want to play it. Bornak, who wrote this, can be found sharing his wisdom as a Mag'har orc on the official World of Warcraft forums. Did Mag'har come out in Cataclysm? I don't think so. In the next issue, it looks like we have Orgrim Doomhammer there, and looks like that's drawn by Chris Metzen. That's his distinctive art style. And here's sorry Chris, but this is a real artist right here. I mean, look, you're way better than what I can do, dude. I'm not saying that. Okay, maybe not way better. I'm actually a pretty decent artist. This is probably about on par with what I could do. This is way better than what I could do. Ajara. Or not Ajara. Alexstrasza in dragon form, maybe fighting Deathwing. Very cool. So we just get all this cool art at the end of that. We already saw the pencils. Oh, look at that. I think that's Alexstrasza in her dragon form, and she's got this cool chain thing at the end. That's it. So we finished the second episode. The second issue, I mean. Cool. That's nice. So there's 3 to go because there's 5 total on this one. We're halfway through the first kind of volume of it, but we got another episode in the pipe, 5x5. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching, for listening, for bearing with me. I like it. I like doing it, and I appreciate you all being here. See you next time on Lore of Warcraft.